I'm sorry, I disagree. I actually have visited Sderot within the past year, and our organization has an office in Sderot all the time, which has been targeted by rocket fire as well, directly across the street from the police station that houses the casings of these thousands and thousands of rockets that have been fired. And speaking with residents that I speak to in Sderot, they say enough is enough. When am I allowed to take a shower that lasts longer than 15 seconds? What about my elderly mother who can't take a shower because she doesn't think that she can get to the bomb shelter fast enough to be secure and safe? Which child do I take out of the bed at night because I only have 15 seconds
Megan Buren,
and I can't get all three?
In the long term,
that's what the people in Sderot are saying to me. Enough is enough.
In the long term, how do you see this ending? Christopher Gunnis asking you, how do you see this leading?
How do you see it contributing to peace? I'd like to know that. Durable, lasting, just peace.
I think that the people that understand what's going on the ground here understand that Hamas is never going to negotiate with Israel.
They have been.
And while Israel is defending itself in the south against Hamas,
let's do one at a time. Just 1 second.
Europeans won't speak to. Israel is still negotiating with Fatah on the West Bank and working towards a two-state solution where both sides can live in peace. Remember that Israel left all of Gaza 3 years ago in hopes of peace, in hopes of jump-starting a solution. What did they get in return? Rockets. What needs to happen now is the rockets need to stop, and Hamas needs to understand that they can no longer fire these rockets.
Christopher Gunnis.
Really, we will move towards a two-state solution with our partners in peace.
Can I just say, I mean, I do hope I don't sound disrespectful, but it is simply empirically incorrect to say that Israel has not been speaking to Hamas and Hamas has not been speaking to Israel. There have been talks in Cairo which led to a ceasefire which came into effect on the 19th of June this year, and there were 5 months of relative calm. Go and ask the people of Sderot, because I've been there and I've asked them. They were very pleased that there were talks, and they were very pleased that those talks led to some sort of peace for them. What happened was, on the night of Barack Obama's election victory, Israel went in to destroy some tunnels which it had known about for some time. I'm not saying there hadn't been rockets on the Hamas side, because there had been, but by and large, compared with the period before then, there had been relative calm. Militants were killed in that operation, and then there was a barrage of rockets. Now, I'm not saying one side broke the ceasefire or the other did, but the fact is that there was, in the 5 months following the 19th of June, a relative period of calm in which the very people that you're talking about in Sderot were very pleased that Israel spoke to Hamas, and that should have been built upon, because there were the glimmers of peace, and instead all of that has been wrecked by this air bombardment and by the continuing rockets.
There were calm. Who wouldn't be pleased with 6 months of calm after having those types of rockets? But let's be clear, this was not a true...
We're sorry, we're having a little trouble with the sound going in and out from Washington. Megan Buren.
We need to move towards a real ceasefire, not just a small calm, but a real ceasefire, because what happened during that calm that you just spoke of, which was quite a reprieve for the citizens of Sderot, Hamas used that as an opportunity to rearm with even stronger and more weapons. And now what happens, we're not just speaking of the people that live directly outside of Sderot and directly outside of Gaza, very close within 3 miles, 7 miles of Gaza. We're talking about major population centers of Israel that are now also under rocket fire. We're talking about the entire Negev, the entire south of the country, because their rockets backed by Iran and funded by Iran are going further and further into the country, targeting more and more innocent civilians. The calm was used to rearm.
And let me say that we condemn the ground missiles that are striking further into Israel. But let me also say that the route of the rockets, and people in Gaza tell you this all the time, and by the way, I also spend a lot of time in Gaza, they will tell you that the occupation is being resisted. That's the reason for the rockets. Now, I condemn the rockets. That is a condemnable way to try and resist occupation. But the fact is that although Israel did leave Gaza in 2005, it then exposed an occupied people for the first time in human history to the most stringent trade embargo in the history of trade relations. In international law, there's the concept of effective control. If you control the airspace, the land, and the sea borders of a place, you occupy it. And from the UN's point of view, there is one occupied territory. So if there's one Israeli soldier occupying the West Bank, then then Gaza is also occupied. I'm afraid that is how international law works. Gaza has continued to be occupied, and until the underlying cause of this, the occupation, is addressed and the strangulation, which is part of that occupation, is addressed, I fear for the people of Sderot.
I'm sorry, I can't accept the argument that rockets are justifiable because of occupation. First of all, I disagree that they're occupation. Again,
I'm saying that people in Gaza will tell you that the rockets are a response to occupation, and it's the occupation which UN Security Council resolutions say should be addressed, which many in Gaza see as the cause of this.
I'm sorry, Israel left all of Gaza 3 years ago in hopes of peace. Like I've already stated, in hopes of peace, they pulled every soldier, every settler out of Gaza, not a single Israeli, aside from the Israeli Gilad Shalit, who was kidnapped and taken over the border and has been in captivity held by Hamas for years now. There is not a single Israeli left in Gaza up until a few days ago. And what happened? They got rockets in return.
You know,
what did Israel do? First, it tries peaceful means. Economic diplomacy, in order to try and dissuade Hamas from firing rockets. But
we're going to wrap up this discussion. Last point I want to ask about the blockade and the issue of the blockade, the effect of the blockade, and whether Megan Buren, Christopher Gunnis, where you see this going. Christopher Gunnis, Hamas has said they would end the, are calling for a ceasefire if the blockade were ended.
Well, I fear that what we're going to see is a continuation of the land offensive for quite some time. I fear that the blockade is unlikely to end. I fear that there'll be further radicalization within Gaza, entirely playing into the hands of Hamas, who will be given a very fertile recruiting ground. There'll be more terror for the people of Sderot, condemnably, and there will be more terror in the threat of military action for the poor, innocent women and children of Gaza who suffered quite enough. Talking and engagement, that's the only way out of this.
Finally, Megan Buren, on the issue of the blockade, the issue of what we've been hearing described by the United Nations and other human rights groups, the issue of, well, Sarah Roy, the Harvard professor, asking how can keeping food and medicine from the people of Gaza protect the people of Israel? How can the impoverishment and suffering of Gaza's children, more than half the population, benefit anyone? And that was actually written even before the attack.
As Mr. Gunn said, there are thousands of tons of food and supplies going in from Israel into Gaza. And that doesn't mean that the situation in Gaza is easy right now. It's certainly not an easy situation for the innocent civilians that are living in Gaza right now. But when will Hamas stop the rocket fire?
Are you denying that there is a humanitarian crisis? Megan Buren, are you denying there's a humanitarian crisis in Gaza?
I'm not in Gaza right now, and frankly, I find it hard to take Hamas at its word. And I have to say that Israel continues to send in thousands and thousands of tons of food and supplies every single day.
Christopher Gunnis is not Hamas. He's with United Nations Relief and Works Agency.
And I'm saying there's a humanitarian crisis. Please answer that.
Okay, well, Christopher Gunn is saying that there's a humanitarian crisis. I'm saying it's unfortunate that all of the food and supplies that are going in from Israel into Gaza, Hamas isn't distributing to its people.
Christopher Gunnis, is that the case, that Hamas... Let me put that question to the person on the ground in Gaza. Is that the case? It's Hamas that's stopping the distribution of food and medicine.
I have heard no reports of Hamas hoarding food, but I have to say that there is a war going on, and our workers are not getting out to everywhere where they normally get out to. Our food distributions are going on, and we're saying we need more petrol, we need more fuel, and we need more grain. And if we don't get that, the humanitarian crisis will deepen, and a lot more people will suffer, and we made more radical, and
we're going to have to leave it there. I want to thank you both for being with us. Megan Buren, thank you, senior advisor with the Israel Project, a nonprofit group in Washington and Jerusalem, and Christopher Gunnis, spokesperson for the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, joining us on the line from Gaza. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. We go to break and then come back to look at UN action, and then we'll go back on the ground to Gaza. Stay with us.